It would appear that either yesterday or today, Joe Biden has announced an intention to bring in a digital currency in the United States. Um, One of the features of a collapsing system, we saw it with the Soviet Union in its final years, is that they have leaders whose accession to power is questionable, who are part of an insider group, and who are senile. So that was one of the features, particularly one of the features of the Soviet Union in its final years. Brezhnev had had a stroke, but they weren't able to get rid of him, and then he was succeeded by Andropov, who initially was very competent, but then became very sick, and was succeeded then by Chernenko, who was incapacitated before he even took office. What that signifies is that the decisions are not being made by these people. Trump was the last competent person to hold office who could have had any semblance of independent decision making, and that's why they wanted rid of him. So don't imagine that Biden is making these decisions. He's not. He's only signing off on it, and he's not even coherent on TV now. If Kamala Harris takes over, that's what will happen if Biden is removed from office. Kamala Harris will take over. She laughs at the most inappropriate things, and she laughs all the time. It's a pure psychopathic laugh. She laughs and laughs and laughs all the time at nothing. That's the psychopathic thing. But that's probably what'll happen. I don't see Biden making it to the end of 4 years in office. He's too useless. And he's even an embarrassment to those who were Orange Man bad. How is this turning out for them now? But this is relevant, the introduction of a digital currency, because the United States dollar has been a stable currency since the foundation of the United States. It got through the Great Depression without hyperinflation. It has depreciated over time in the way that currencies do. The depreciation of the value of $1 is not in itself a cause for alarm. Currencies deteriorate in their value naturally. Look at the pound sterling, look at every currency. The use of a currency over years and decades and centuries naturally causes its depreciation in value. There's nothing to worry about that. But I do think that the reason for the introduction of a digital currency will be that once that's in place, they can flick a switch and take two zeros off the value of whatever currency is coming in. There will have to be a currency that's enumerated in some way, so it might be a virtual dollar or a digital dollar of some kind. But if they can get rid of cash, paper currency, hard currency in people's pockets, then it makes it much easier for them then to say, right, we've got this digital currency in place, and at midnight tomorrow, 2 zeros are falling off it. Spend your money now, folks. Spend your money now. I had a realisation this morning. I went up for coffee in Howth, and I suddenly noticed that all the newspapers, including, the Irish Times, the rest of them, RTE, were talking about electricity. In the middle of June this year, I decided that our house here, both of the buildings, eventually I reached the decision that both of the buildings would be altered to being power cut proof. And then I had to look much deeper at how you make a place power cut proof. I mean, the crude notion of it is that you buy a great big diesel generator that has 2 outlets into each building. But that, of course, is going to use up an awful lot of fuel if you have a power cut. You look at hotels and that kind of thing. The big hotels all have diesel jennies, and it's a power cut and the diesel jenny just kicks in, but it uses a shitload of diesel. What would you do for a very large house that only has 3 people living in it? So there's that dichotomy between being a large house and the fact that the actual electrical usage isn't all that much. So I decided to go solar. But there is a catch with solar. And the catch with solar, and it is a significant catch, a very significant catch indeed, is that you are not allowed to run solar panels if there's a power cut. The logic being, it is actually a logical reason, if you're on the grid and you have solar panels and the grid goes down, then your solar panels are pumping your raw DC back out into the system, and you could be electrocuting people. So they won't allow that. So the way that approved solar panels work, I gather, I mean, there may be people with more expertise than me, but I'm putting it crudely. Approved solar panels take every 5 or so seconds or 10 seconds, they take a tiny trace amount of electricity from the mains. Now, it's not enough to even really register at all on a bill. It might be €1 worth of electricity per fortnight. But they take that out of the mains to keep them running. And when that stops at 5 or 10 second intervals, when the mains stop feeding the solar with that signal to keep going, then the solar will cut off. Even if you have nighttime batteries, so you can get solar panels and you can get nighttime batteries that'll tide you over for 10, 12 hours at night, they will all cut off automatically if there's a power cut. They don't tell you that. So what do? How do you get your solar working through power cuts? It is easy. You need to get a diesel generator. It doesn't need to be the diesel generator that would, supply a hospital kind of thing, but those little farty diesel generators that you buy in a garden shop won't do. It has to be a wired-in diesel generator, wired into your fuse board. They're about 15,000. If you have the diesel generator, then you connect it to the two solar panel systems, or one solar, however many solar panel systems you have. The diesel generator is then reading the mains, the grid goes off, the diesel generator goes on, and it steps in instead of the grid, and it sends that 5 to 10 second signal to your solar panels. So what happens is you have a power outage and the house goes dark for about 5, 10, 15 seconds until the diesel generator kicks in, and then it starts up the solar. So that's an efficient system, and it's also a system that gets you around a number of other things. The possibility not just of electrical shortages and grid blackouts or brownouts, but also the possibility of fuel shortages. And you need to think about that as well. So a system of that nature requires a diesel generator, it requires solar panels, it requires batteries, and it requires them to be wired in. It requires the solar panels to be proper ones, and it requires the batteries to be proper ones, not makeshift ones that you make from out cycles and shite like that. It requires the generator to be a proper one, and then they have to be wired in and integrated by qualified recce electricians. So for an average home to make itself power cut proof, you wouldn't get much change out of €40,000. For a bigger home, if you want to have 2 sets of solar panels, you're talking maybe 55,000 up to 60,000 to put in place that equipment. Now, then of course, there's another problem. If your house hasn't been wired recently, if it's an older style fuse board, the twisty fuses, so the old type fuse board that you open up and there's all these circular yokes that you turn and you take a fuse out, then you'll not be allowed to get it installed. So you have to get a building rewired to be ready to take that kind of system, because those systems require, the most up-to-date form of electricals. The rewire of a house can be up to 15,000. How many people out there, Terranure, Rainmora, Santry, Lucan, Limerick, Galway, all over the place, how many people out there need to have their homes rewired? Unless they can pull 15,000 out of their ass to do that. I'd love to know how many people in Ireland are behind in relation to the rewiring of their homes and in relation to the systems that they have in their homes. And in a way, if you have a house that hasn't been rewired since 1970, then you might as well, if you're going to have to spend the money, you've waited. It's interesting, as I said before, to read Twitter and to read the people who are saying, I could do that. Anybody who knows what they're doing could be off-grid in $3,000. You see, that's going to be problematic, because then there's an issue of insurance. Because if you have a dodgy electrical system in the house, then the insurance won't cover you. And the fire insurance and home insurance won't cover you. But there's another issue. You could have a knock on the door from the ESB to say, we think that the infrastructural equipment of this home does not come up to our safety standards. We require it to be removed now. You won't get your money back. So what do you do? And it's interesting, Thomas Sheridan is talking at the moment, The Weak and Strange, about how so many people don't understand what it takes to generate electricity. No, let's listen to a half-witted, potato-faced Swedish retard. That's where to go. But I realised something today looking at the newspapers. I realised that the Irish government policy of running down hard electrical generation in this country, coal and oil, which is the primary means, although solar is actually extremely powerful. People don't know how good solar is. But the policy of running down Ireland's hard power network is not an accident. The new aristocrats won't be the people with the beautiful cars or the jewellery or the holidays, because all those days are over. We are in a situation at the moment of faux normality. What I mean by that is this talk of going back to normal and restrictions will be eased. It's never going to be like what it was. I was talking to a woman today. I said, do you remember when we'd go to the pub in Howth, and this is before February 2020, you'd walk in, you wouldn't have an order, there'd be a turf fire lit, you'd order steak and chips, a dessert, a coffee, that kind of thing. I said, it's never going to go back to that. Well, she said, I wouldn't be sure about it. That's okay. I said, I am sure about it. It's never going to go back to that. Oh, she said, don't you think you're being alarmist? Well, I said, look, in 1939 people said, there's going to be a cataclysm ahead of us, and they may drop nuclear bombs, and they may kill 6 million Jews. If they'd said that in 1939, most of the normies would have said, you're being alarmist. Oh, no, she said, you're being silly. I said, listen, I'll see you. John Waters makes a point. In a roundabout way, he makes a point. We're never going to go back to what it was like. There has been such a psychic shock inflicted on people, whether people are aware of it or not, that we're never going to go back to what it was like. But anyway, I have digressed a bit. Let's talk about electricity. Electricity is going to be the new currency, and they're going to use... They're already in the early stages of overtly weaponizing it. The Greens, that lizard. There's something smirky, particularly imbecilic about Eamon Ryan's smirk. He always says, it's kind of the way the upper lip, it's over his mouth. He looks more imbecilic even than Harris and Varadkar, and they're imbeciles. But Ryan cannot hide his psychosis. Eamon Ryan is gaga. It's like, it's time for him to go on a care in the community scheme. Or not to be allowed out without somebody to accompany him. Eamon Ryan is seriously, seriously deranged. You look at him, the eyes swivel, they actually go round, and the mouth is like a Pez, as one person said to me. And I'm realising that this was deliberate. This is about control. Controlling your access to electricity. Because look at the world we live in today. Can you not charge your iPhone? Can you not use your laptop? Can you not print something out? You're fucked if you don't have electricity. And they know that. And they've done it deliberately. Problem, reaction, solution. What's the problem? The problem is that Ireland is about to enter a long-term permanent situation of an end to easy electricity. Now, if you look at a lot of normies, I remember teaching in one particular secondary school where an awful lot of the younger staff were blids, absolute the fucking loudmouth idiots. And they'd leave the computer on. You'd come in, the computer had been on all night. So, the idea that those kind of, imbeciles should have their access to electricity rationed is, in my opinion, not necessarily automatically bad. But people will have to start thinking about electricity in a much less wasteful and complacent way, and they won't. They're normies. A lot of them are NPCs. They don't, you'd get an NPC. It's only barely a joke. They'd buy a tap, attach it to the sink, and wonder why the water doesn't come out. That's the truth. That's the truth. They don't understand the first and second laws of thermodynamics, that it takes a lot to generate electricity. So you get these asswipes on Twitter, and they're such fucking know-alls as well. Oh, someone who knows what they're doing, they'd have it in place. 2.5, maybe 3 grand. Oh, would they now? Would they now? You need to get independent, grid-proofed, or power cut-proofed electrical generation in your home. You need to have 40 grand for that. Now, that's who the new aristocrats are going to be. Because an awful lot of people out there, more and more and more and more, don't have the capital. As every day is going past, the confidence is going, the fear is coming in, the ability to get loose capital is coming in. I also think that we could see a situation where our currency is rapidly depreciated on us. Oh, we're doing it to protect you against inflation. Oh, we have to ration electricity because you're all so wasteful, aren't you? And there's almost a crumb of truth in that. A lot of people are wickedly wasteful of electricity. So that's the weapon. It hit me starkly this morning looking at the newspapers, because the newspapers, they're all straws in the wind, aren't they? There's a lot of Renfielding happening at the moment, more than I ever remember. The freemen and the land, somebody apparently, they always have Scouse accents. I'm putting the judge on notice. I'm putting this High Court judge on notice in a common law context, because you're going to be guilty of genocide. You're going to go to the gallows, soft lad. Okay. Yeah. And suddenly we've noticed the freeman and the land stuff has reappeared. It has emerged again, resurfaced after ages. It always does, doesn't it? There's a real Renfield thing with freeman and the land. And the people who buy into that, they're normies and NPCs as well. They're just singing a different tune. The new aristocrats will be the people who don't have to worry about two things. They don't have to worry about blackouts, and they don't have to worry about escalating fuel bills. So it looks like now electrical bills in Britain could rise by 2,000%. That's coming here. When it comes to Britain, it comes first. It always moves westward. And that thing, Eamon Ryan, that thing, they're doing this deliberately. They're doing it to control access to electricity, to control your access to use your mobile phone, your smartphone, which they've got us all onto over the past 20 years, the bastards. Your tablet, your laptop, your desktop computer, your printer, your fridge, your cooker, your TV. Suddenly now, your access to those is not going to be quite as convenient as it was, unless of course you have spent the money, the very significant capital outlay, to make your home energy independent. And then of course, to get all that infrastructure that I've described, you have to have on the ground of your home, you have to have it ready for that stuff to be put in. In other words, all the buildings that are going to be getting it have to be rewired up to scratch. You even have to have the physical area ready for putting in a diesel generator. Could you put a diesel generator in an apartment in Ranelagh? Or, an artisan vegan bungalow in Ranelagh? That kind of thing. A little cottage in Ranelagh. Or those big posh terraced houses in Ranelagh. Where are you going to put it there? Is it east-west facing the roof? If it's not, you're fucked. I mean, you're not going to generate electricity in a north-south facing roof. You fucking idiots. So what you going to do? Isn't it funny how we see things flip? How, like the scene in The Wicker Man where they play that game Chop. They're all going round, and then suddenly it changes. And whoever's in the wrong position gets their head cut off. I believe, actually, that particular scene in The Wicker Man was set up. What I mean is that the people on the island set it up to shock Howie. But don't times change? And the aristocrats are the people at the top of society. It doesn't mean titles are going around going, la-di-da-di-da, I'm Rory Cowan and I went to the Shelburne because I was vaccinated. And I say to all the staff on St. Stephen's this morning when they have to come into work, cheer up. That's not the top of society. It's not to do with money, it's to do with power in more than one sense, I suppose.